Hello and welcome to this edition of Press Conference. I'm your host, Jim DeLorenzo, the principal of Jim DeLorenzo Public Relations. You can find me online at jimdelorenzo.com. I have found that my career in public relations is my true vocation, telling the stories of my clients and my colleagues in a compelling way to drive sales, membership, and awareness. I've been blessed in my career, and I have many ideas that might be helpful to our viewers. Please feel free to contact me directly, either by email at jim@jhdenterprises.com or by cell phone or text message at 215-266-5943. I'm always looking forward to hearing your stories and eager to hear them. You can also find me online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. In my career, I've had the good fortune to meet many interesting people: athletes, entrepreneurs, reporters, coaches, authors, executives, editors, entertainers, and innovators. My guest today is an old friend from my Villanova University undergrad days, Larry Goanos. He is the author of the new book, Professional Lines Insurance and Oral History: The People and Companies Who Built a Niche. Larry is also the founder of Andros Risk Services, an independent insurance consulting firm which performs a variety of services, including expert witness work, policy drafting, training on professional lines insurance products for brokers and underwriters, claims advocacy, reinsurance and insurance audits, due diligence reviews, and program analysis for the insureds. Larry began his insurance career as an attorney with law firms in New York and Boston before moving into professional lines underwriting management. He has held senior underwriting executive positions at AIG, National Union, and ACE, and was a broker at Marsh in San Francisco, and was a managing director and head of the Marsh FINPRO Financial Institutions National Sales Practice in New York. A cum laude graduate of both Villanova University and Boston College Law School, it is a great privilege for me to introduce my friend and welcome my guest, Larry Goanos, to the show today. Larry, it's great to see you. We've been talking off and on over the last few months, but it's great to see you virtually today, and thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Jim, for having me. Also, you did omit one disclaimer. Normally when I'm on a talk show or a TV presentation, they have to disclaim by law that I am not George Clooney because I look so much like him. People get confused. I don't want his lawyers contacting my lawyers again. So just make that clear. I am not George Clooney.
You know, I forgot to mention that. I know you did tip me off that beforehand, and you know, we did get contacted by George's lawyers.
Yeah,
he's issued a cease and
desist. They watch me closely.
He's issued a cease and desist order for you to stop mentioning his name in any way. So, Larry, I'm very interested in how you have been the author of 3 big books. I think they're all of them are oral histories, are they not?
No, actually, the second book is not.
Okay.
But yes, and by the way, just so your audience knows, I'm here not to talk about insurance, but sort of the process of writing a book or tackling a major problem. I'll give you my insights into how I was able to do it because it took me a little while. The first book I wrote in 2008, so you know I was in my 40s when I finally got it out there, and it took a little while.
What has been the impetus for you to write books? I mean, you've got a pretty successful business. You've been in a very a good career that you've had for many years in the insurance industry, and it's as you mentioned in some of the things we've talked about, it's a very niche space that you're working with. But what inspired you to write your first book, and what has continued to inspire you as you've just completed your third book?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jim. The first book really comes down to one person. It was a friend of mine that I worked with at AIG. You know, it's a big insurance conglomerate based in New York. And we worked side-by-side offices. Then he moved to another division. And on Friday, January 20th, 2000, I believe was the exact date, he was 34 years old, a guy named Joe Fine. And he was promoted to division president at AIG, which was a big job, especially for a 34-year-old. And that had been his goal, to become a division president. So it was quite an accomplishment. And on the day that he got promoted, He went out after work for one beer with a friend of ours, and then he got on the train and went back to his new house in Westchester County. He had just moved to Westchester. New house. He had a 1-year-old son with his wife. He had just gotten a brand new BMW. He got in his car to go home and hit an ice patch and hit a tree and died.
Wow.
On the very day of his big promotion, he ended up passing away at age 34. And I remember when it occurred, I said to myself, it's a shame that future generations of insurance professionals won't really know Joe or what he was about or his accomplishments, because we don't really have a history of any of this. And I said to myself, someday I'm going to write a book about a book about our industry, and I'm going to mention Joe in the book.
Sure.
And then 9/11 occurred, and more people died, and time just sort of started passing by. And I'll tell you the first lesson, Jim, that I learned. Whenever you have a project you want to tackle, like a big one, like build a house, paint a portrait, write a book, learn to play the guitar, whatever it might be, a lot of people, myself included, will say, oh, I'll do it when I get some time. If you do that, you'll never get time. You have to schedule. There's an old saying, you have to schedule greatness. And eventually, for the first year and a half, I had something like 10 pages written, because I was just doing it when I had free time. And then I took a job where I had to ride the train every day from Manhattan up to Westchester County. And the second day of the job, I said, you know what? My 1-hour train ride every day up and back, I'm going to take out my laptop and write this book every day during that 1 hour each way. And all of a sudden I went from 10 pages to the next year and a half, 380 pages.
Wow. That's actually inspiring too, because you think of that, and you think of the big projects, and you think of the tendency to be, I'll get to it tomorrow, or I'm going to do that later, or I have to work on this right now. And as you said so many times, we never get to that. And
Right.
just the idea that you took that onus upon yourself and said, no, I'm going to do this. I've got this time where I can do this and still be productive. And now your first book was also on the insurance industry, correct?
Yes, yes.
And
Right.
as you said, it was telling the stories of the people that you had met. And one person described your first book, and I think it has applied this description to your latest book, as it's like you're having a dinner conversation with these high-powered individuals and discussing how they achieved different things and the different failures they had and the different successes they had, how they led their lives in the professional space. And it's like you're at a dinner table with all these people and partaking in these conversations. Would you say that's a fair assessment of what your books accomplish?
Yeah, I mean, that was my goal, and I didn't know all these people in the book, and some of them are dead. So I would get stories from people who knew them, or someone would say, hey, you got to call this guy, he'll tell you about that guy. And so, that was my sort of goal, to preserve these stories for future generations who come into insurance to understand what went before them. And it's a very conversational style that I write in, but the goal there is to preserve memories. And by the way, the second part of my lesson, besides scheduling greatness, and even something as simple as a gym, so many people sign up for a gym and say, I'll go as soon as I get some chances, and they don't. But if they say, I'm going every Monday night from 7 to 9, no matter what, that's how you accomplish it. The next saying, it's an old English saying, how do you eat an elephant? With a teaspoon. And that's another part of it. Some people say, oh, I can't write a 300-page book. I don't have the time. If you just write a little bit at a time, it's like eating an elephant with a teaspoon. You'll get there. My train rides, some days I'd write one paragraph in an hour, but every day, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You're eating away at that elephant with a little teaspoon. It eventually adds up. So don't let the size of the project intimidate you. You got to just start and keep at it little by little, and you'll get there.
That's an interesting way to describe it too, and I like that idea of scheduling greatness. I think that's a great little notion to incorporate in your daily life, because I think we all get carried away with our schedules, and certainly in the last year or so we've got so many different demands and so many different things that we're trying to do while we're working. I think that's a great way to describe it. When you finished the first book, you sent it to somebody very interesting and got a very interesting response. Would you mind sharing that story with our viewers?
Yeah, that's another little lesson and a saying. Apparently it's a Zen saying, and I'm not a Zen master, but generally the saying is leap and the net shall appear. So, the idea being just do something, take some action, and you'll find support for it. So writing this book was a leap of faith that, the first edition of it, which sold thousands of copies, a couple thousand, could have fallen flat on its face and nobody could have bought it. And so when I had it written, I decided to leap, and out of the blue, I sent a copy of the book to Warren Buffett. I didn't know him. I got his address in Omaha from the internet. And I wrote to him and said, I told him about the book. I said, all the proceeds are going to charity, and I hope you would read it, blah, blah, blah. Just taking a chance. I didn't know him. I had no connection. A week later, his assistant, Deb Bosanek, who sat with President Obama at the State of the Union a few years back, she called me on the phone and said, Larry, Mr. Buffett got your book. He's too busy to read it, but he thanks you for sending it. And I said, wow, I'm just flattered that you would even call me. Most people would throw it away. I'd never hear it. No, he wanted me to call you. So I just told people, I said, hey, Warren Buffett's secretary called me. That was pretty impressive, right? 6 months later, I get an email after 4th of July weekend, 2009. And it says from Warren Buffett. And I thought someone was kidding me.
Right.
And he says, Larry, I read your book over the weekend. I loved it. I hope all my insurance managers get a copy. Good luck with the sales. And
wow.
Just like that, I wrote him back because I asked him if we could use his kind words in our advertising. And he said yes. He was very gracious. And since then, I've probably, emailed with him 5 or 6 times. And he's a very down-to-earth, nice guy. He has my current book. He hasn't read it yet, but Deb Bosanek said she thinks he's going to read that one too. We'll wait and see. Fingers crossed.
That's fantastic. And as you said, you took that leap. You sent it to him, and you got a great response. And it kind of brings you up. It kind of buoys your spirits to know that you made that connection and you just did it. A spur of the moment. I'm going to do this.
Right. And I'm not somebody who could advance his career or his fortune in any way. Not that he needs any advancement, but he did it from an altruistic perspective. Supposedly he reads about 500 pages a day. I've read. Wow. That's one way he stays sharp, is just reads a lot. So that helped. And then my current book, I have another billionaire involved. As you probably know, Jim, I do hang with a lot of billionaires.
I know. Well, you started that when you were working with me at the Villanova.
So I sent a note to Hank Greenberg, who's a legend in the insurance world, and he was longtime CEO of AIG. Now he's CEO of Star Companies. But I sent him an email and said, Mr. Greenberg, I'm writing this book. I'd be honored if you'd write the introduction. And again, it was a leap and hope the net appears. And he didn't get back to me for a month, and I was ready to move on to somebody else. So I sent him in a follow-up, and I said, Mr. Greenberg, I know you're very busy. It's been a month. I assume you don't have the time to write my introduction. So I just want to let you know I'm going to ask somebody else on the off chance that he was thinking of doing it. Next day, I get a call from his head of communications. He said he's going to write it for you. And just like that, it happened. So
wow.
The message there is don't be shy, don't be afraid, shoot for the stars, and you never know what's going to happen.
That's fantastic. And again, that resonates with me, and I think it will with some of our viewers, because we often have that fear of doing something, and we're got out of our comfort zone. But so many people, like you described, so many people recommend getting out of your comfort zone, taking the leap. And when you see that it works, on so many times, you're going to have your failures, but you're also going to have your successes. And I think that's the great thing when you make those leaps of faith, is to have them result in something like that. Larry, I'm really glad that you're with me today, and I do have some more questions for you, but we're going to take a quick commercial break from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back with Larry Goanos of Andros Risk Services and the author of 3 particularly good books about the insurance industry. We'll be right back.
So, I'm kind of new here, but I've noticed a trend. My human does this funny thing where she goes around and gets all my toys, and then she hides them in that basket by the door. But it's always the same basket, and it's always in the same place. And then she acts so surprised when I find them, but, she's putting them in the same basket. Again. It's like, hello, that's where you put it last time. You were the worst at hide and go seek.
Listen, what will make your event simply beautiful? Is it your attire, your decorations, your entertainment? Well, join me, Alicia Simone, as I chat with some amazing vendors and clientele who will share their stories and images and their experiences. Right here on RVN TV, Tuesday at 11:30 a.m. and Wednesday at 4 p.m. It will be simply beautiful. See you then.
Why buy local? When you shop with local businesses, you're spending your money on more than just the item you're buying. You're adding a building block to your neighborhood. It starts with a single purchase, maybe a cup of coffee, groceries from a local co-op, or even a shiny new bicycle from one of the nearly 28 million small businesses nationwide. Your money doesn't stay in the till for long though. Local business owners use the money to create a lot of economic activity in your neighborhood, like buying from suppliers, many of whom are also local businesses. Paying taxes to the city, which builds and maintains the infrastructure we all rely on. Employing local workers, contributing to 65% of the net new jobs each year. Add this all together and you've got a recipe for a happier, healthier, more connected neighborhood. Now that's an investment worth making.
Welcome back to Press Conference. I'm your host, Jim DeLorenzo, principal of Jim DeLorenzo Public Relations. And my guest today is Larry Goanos of Andros Risk Services. And we were talking about his most recent book, which was published at the beginning of the year. And the book is Professional Lines, Insurance, and Oral History, the People and Companies Who Built a Niche. Larry, where would people go to buy the book that are viewing us today if they are interested in the topic?
Jim, I'm glad you asked. Here's actually a copy of it, 425 pages. It's available on Amazon.com, and currently we have 17 reviews, all of them 5-star. Fantastic. One of the things that I was interested in as we've been talking, Larry, is the importance of innovation and how you've, in your conversations with these insurance industry leaders and others that you've interviewed for your book, the topic of innovation is probably very high in their minds as far as how do I change this industry or how do I change this business model. Could you, if you would, tell me a little bit more about the role innovation has played for these individuals and how it can be applied to any business?
Yeah, sure. Well, one of my favorite stories from the book is about this guy named Paul Sult, S-U-L-T, who unfortunately now has passed away, but he had a 20-year retirement. He died about 4 years ago, and I had spoken to him starting in 2006 for the book. Somebody had said I had to interview him because he came up with 3 insurance products himself, and he was quite a character. When I got in touch with him, he was retired down in North Carolina, and the first time I talked to him, he said, "Larry, I'm 85 years old, and I'm in great health because I got a good doctor." And I said, "Oh, really?" And he goes, "Yeah, you know what his name is? Jack Daniels." Then he would laugh. And he probably told me that joke 5 times over the next 7 or 8 years. But in 1969, he was working in Chicago for an insurance brokerage. And his boss came in. There was a guy who was just appointed to the school board in Omaha, Nebraska. And he wrote a letter to the insurance brokerage in Chicago, the big city. This is the 60s. And he said, "I'm going to be on the school board, and I'm a little worried in case we get sued. I'd like some insurance. Can you sell me insurance?" And the boss gave this letter to Paul Sult. And Paul said, I looked at it and he said, "There's no insurance for being on a school board." And he said, "I crumpled it up. I threw it in the garbage." And then he said, "I went to lunch." And he said, "After my second martini, I was thinking about it. And I said, there is no insurance for school board, but maybe we could create it." So he went back to the office. He took the letter out of the garbage. He contacted an insurance carrier. He was a broker, the middleman. And long story short, he developed an insurance product for people serving on school boards to protect them if they get sued for something they take on the school board.
So after he got a book, he said, of all the school boards in America, there's something like 3,000 school districts, and he sent a letter to all of them and sold them the insurance, and he ended up selling a ton. He was a hero in his company. And then one day he said, a school board is sort of like being the head of or on the board of regents of a university. It's the same type of thing, just a higher level. So then he creates a new product for university regents and trustees, and he sends letters to all of them and sells a ton of that. And then he said to himself, being like on a school board or a university regent is really just being a public official. You're a public official. So then he came up with the idea for insurance for public officials like mayors and police chiefs and anybody serving in a public capacity, and he sold a ton of that insurance. So I think there's two things that come out of that.
That's
so one
interesting.
is just because it doesn't exist doesn't mean it's not a need for it. So look around and think in your industry, what don't we have? What could there be a need for? And then even existing products, how can you expand them or existing ideas into other areas where they're not currently being used? It's hard to believe in the 1960s, nobody thought about insuring school boards or public officials, but this guy, Paul Salt, came up with the idea and made millions and millions for his employer and for the insurance industry as a whole. And all three products are still very big in the insurance industry, 40, 50 years after he came up with the ideas.
It's very interesting that you use those three examples because, and being the one guy who thought of all those things, because the layman just thinks insurance is insurance and doesn't think about, we're going to need insurance for this. I can remember back in the early days of working on the internet and working for a company that didn't have actual physical products but had intellectual property, and the idea of ensuring that intellectual property was still kind of new and still kind of frontier aspect of it. But as you said, that innovation, that little spark that says, this is needed, I think it's needed, I think other people will think it's needed too. I often use the example of ESPN and my friend Bill Rasmussen, who had the idea for ESPN. People told him he was crazy, and people told him he was crazy until it went on the air. And then after it went on the air, everybody was like, I want in on this. And everybody started taking credit for it. And everybody started believing in it. It is interesting that role, a little inspiration, a little intuition, and the innovation part. What are some of the other stories that you've heard and that you've gathered for your books that kind of highlight that innovation?
Well, yeah, before I get to that, just to expand a little bit more on Paul Salt. So in the insurance industry, and I do training for insurance carriers and brokers, one of the things we tell people is when you want to innovate, look at what we don't do and how we can do it. So it's very easy in the insurance industry because every insurance policy has exclusions, right? Things that we don't want to cover. So what we say is look at the exclusions, the things we're not willing to cover, and try and figure out how we can cover them. And that would be a new product. So that's how the root of your innovation comes from that.
Interesting.
So you can transfer that lesson to almost any other industry, such as, auto insurance or autos. You build cars, but you won't have a certain feature. You can't put, well, why not? Can't you build a car with that feature? Why do you exclude or not build that feature? You can pretty much transfer the idea of filling the need that we don't currently fill to any industry in some way or another. There's got to be a way to meet that niche. Paul was the big inventor, but there were other innovations throughout the history of insurance that came about different ways, and some of them come up when there's a problem. For instance, there's inclusion in professional lines insurance policies, what we call 1v1, meaning if one insured sues another, the insurance company won't cover it because they don't want to, pay for internal fighting. And that was never an exclusion in a policy until in the 1980s, early 1980s, Bank of America bought another bank, and they realized the other bank was mismanaged, and the directors who are now part of Bank of America had done some bad things, and they sued their own directors. And prior to that, believe it or not, nobody thought any company would sue their own people. So they never had an exclusion on it. But because that came up, all of a sudden, the insurance industry said, oh, wait a minute, we have to put an exclusion in the policies. We can't be covering one insured suing another, and we're paying legal fees on both sides and damages and settlements and all that. So the seeds of innovation are sort of everywhere if you just look around and think of it from sometimes an opposite point of view, like what you wouldn't want to do, and then how you can make that into a product.
That's very interesting, because you think of, I like that idea. Find what we don't do and why, and come up with a rationale for why we should do it.
Yeah.
I think the example I've been following lately, and it particularly applies to the public relations industry, is the Jeff Bezos example of, if you've got an idea for a new company or a new business line and you want me to take it seriously, you need to submit to me a one-page press release describing what the company is or what the product is before I will even consider it. If you can summarize it in a one-page press release, what the new business is or what the new product is, it's got a better chance of me understanding it and accepting it than if you went into this long, detailed explanation of what we're going to do. And I think that idea of identifying something that we don't do, but we probably should do, and this is how we do it. If you can communicate that effectively too, and it's a lot easier for people to have a buy-in to it and to say, yes, we do need this.
Yeah, I agree.
Now, when you are writing your book, writing this most recent book, what was the biggest challenge that you faced in writing the new book?
Well, that's a good question, Jim. And I gave you two answers to that. So the biggest challenge is getting, as they say in the writing business, getting your ass in the chair, right? Because people have so many excuses to not say, I got to feed the kids, I got to walk the dog, I got to do my other job. And so they don't sit down to write. So I have three little tips for people who are trying to, again, any project. It could be writing a book, or it could be painting a portrait, building a house. So one is called the Seinfeld Method. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but supposedly Jerry Seinfeld, to instill discipline in himself, and I have used this one, to make sure that he wrote humor every day, that he tried to write new jokes every single day. He put an X on the calendar. He'd print out a calendar and have it in front of him on his desk or on the wall. And every day that he wrote, he put an X. And if he missed a day, he would either leave it blank or put a red circle to say that's a day I missed. So physically, he would see a manifestation of writing every day.
That's
and
great.
Some people
like
are motivated by that. I've done that quite a bit myself, where you're like, it's 11:30 at night, I want to go to bed, but I feel like I don't want that calendar to have a red circle. I'm going to go sit and write, even if I only write 3 sentences, I'm going to get something so I can put an X on the calendar.
Wow.
So the Seinfeld Method is one way to make sure you get the ass in the chair. Another one that people use is a chain of paper clips. Every day that you do your project, whether it's painting, writing, building, whatever it might be, you put another paper clip on a chain and you keep lengthening. And the rule is, if you miss a day, you have to start over totally. Take the whole chain apart and start over. So that's another motivator. People will say, you know what, it's late, I want to go to bed, but I don't want to take apart 60 links in my paperclip chain, so I'm going to just do it right now before I go to bed so I don't have to do that. And then another one for me that I found with my most recent book is I make a visual list of everything I have, every point or chapter I have to write, and I cross them off as I get them done. Not necessarily a full chapter, but parts of a chapter. And I would sit at my desk and say, oh, there's still 7 that are not crossed off. I want to cross them all off. So let me work on this one right now so I can cross it off. So for me, the visual depiction, again, gets under my skin. I'm like, I got to take care of that. And so those kinds of things can motivate you to chip away, eat your elephant with the teaspoon every day, and eventually you're going to get done. And, just a little bit every day, you're going to get there. Just keep making progress. That was actually Verizon ad. They used to say, make progress every day, and that's accurate. You just have to do whatever you do every single day.
That is a great philosophy to have, and I think I'm very grateful that you shared that with me, Larry, because I think that can apply to my work, and I think to a lot of other people too. Larry, I want to thank you for being my guest today. It's very, very happy to connect with you as my Villanova classmate and former Villanova student newspaper colleague, and it's always good to hear from you. I congratulate you on the new book, Professional Lines Insurance, an Oral History, the People and Companies who built a niche. And I want to thank you again for being my guest, Larry, and we'll talk again very soon, you and I.
Thanks for having me, Jim.
And I want to thank you for watching us today. I look forward to seeing you all again very, very soon. Take care.